So what we're going to do today is we're going to build on some of the things that we covered in the first part. So I would be really interested in hearing, and so will Tracy and Megan, on what you've been able to do since part one, when you were clearer on some of the roles and responsibilities of a careers link governor. We're going to look at the impact that we are aware has arisen from the Ofsted inspections that have been going on both locally and nationally. Tracy's going to talk to you about how we intend to progress from where we are at the moment to becoming what's called a careers hub in September 22. And then we're going to have an open discussion on what we can do to help you increase your involvement and what working towards being good looks like. So they're the main objectives for today, and as you can see, there are 5 things. So there will be almost 5 sections as we're going through. So just to remind you what we did in part 1, what we looked at was the strategic duties of a careers link governor and some of the other roles that are going on within your schools and colleges that have a careers relation to them. We looked at the 2 key strategic documents, which is the white paper for FE, which came out in January, and we also looked at the careers guidance, statutory guidance document that came out in July. If any of you came to part 1 in July, we were a bit more hazy about what was happening in terms of the strategic guidance, because it didn't come out until right the end of July, which was after we'd done the training. Those of you who came to the part 1 2 weeks ago, I was able to update you with a little bit more about what we now know about the statutory guidance. So if going forward, as we go through this discussion, some bits come out, I will update you just to make sure that you all know exactly the same level of information. We looked at Gatsby and Compass, and I know that there are actually people on this call because I've sat next to you, and we've done Compass with you present, which has been great. We looked at the sorts of things that you wanted to start to ask your colleagues across senior leadership teams, across your teaching community, maybe across your stakeholders. And then we started to put together some things that you could personally use as your own improvement plan. So that's the sort of review on what we did. We also looked at the sorts of questions that you would want to raise when you had your first meeting with your careers leader. So we sort of left that last part 1 and said, can you go ahead and book in some time with them to find out what the roles were across your schools and colleges, if you could get access to your last or most recent Compass score, which has been, I know for a fact that some of you have actually done that alongside your careers leaders now, to maybe have a review of what sort of information is on your website, to look at how things are evaluated and how and who you use within your schools to make sure that your programmes are meeting need and not assuming that what is being delivered meets need. So you can actually use them against some form of measurable benchmarking. And then to look at the boring stuff, like when was the last time a careers policy was updated? When was the last time it was presented to your governing body? What was your involvement in any development plans and all of that sort of thing. So those were the things that we left you with tasks to do. So before we go any further, I'm now going to stop sharing my screen, and if we could have an open discussion. So I think without hearing all of you, we know that there has been a significant improvement in the number of link governors that are attending our meetings and that are meeting their careers leaders. We have seen, well, I was going to say a massive increase. I know that just for my schools alone, I have, out of my 20, I've had 4 governors sitting next to me in meetings in the last 2 months. And that is more than I had in the entire last year. So the purposes of these CPD sessions that we put on in July and now, they're certainly having an impact. The feedback from careers leaders initially was a little bit, there was a little bit of scary, you know, what do they want to see? Why are they checking up on me? But one of you mentioned that, you know, that you were challenging some of the benchmark scores. That is your role, and careers leaders really do need that sort of challenging. I don't want to go into examples, but I was present in a situation about a month ago where one of the careers leaders that I'm working with has had incredibly high benchmarking scores for so long. Myself and the EA were sitting watching her do the compass, and she's just basically started writing yes to everything. And I challenged her on a couple of things, and then the EA started to challenge her on some more. And it was almost like, we know that you're doing a great job, and a lot of compass just asked yes or no's. And my discussion that I have with everybody is there's always a yes, but yes, we're doing that, but what can we do extra? And in your roles, if you can do the but bit, that is really helpful. We know that some of you have started to contact us direct, us being the enterprise coordinators, and that is our role. We will happily share anything that we have with you. All you have to do is ask. I also know that both Megan and myself have been asked to present to governing bodies, probably after Christmas, about careers within well, it's 3 for me, and I think it's probably 1 or 2 for Megan. So that's really reassuring as well, to know that we're actually being seen as a support to you, and if we can spread out the message, then that's what we're there for. All you have to do is ask. We know that governors are actually asking careers leaders for information to present. So sometimes that can be labour market information, sometimes it can be information related to the statutory documents, sometimes it can be things about, you know, courses that are coming in, or they're just asking careers leaders for more information. So that line of communication has been established, and it's because of people like you who have attended today. And we also know, probably, which we're going to go on to in a minute, that a lot of governors have become involved more greatly in this term purely because of the number of Ofsted inspections that are currently pending or have already happened in our area. And obviously, as part of your role as a governor, you know, you would want to know what needs to be made ready and prepared for when Ofsted finally arrive, and they are in the area, which we're going to talk about in a minute. So before I go on, is there anything else that anybody wants to say about your existing input into schools and colleges? I will take that silence as no. So Ofsted, let's move on to Ofsted. What do we know? Well, we know so far in our region there have already been 3 inspections. 1 in Farnborough, 1 just outside of our region, but linked to one of our schools in Waterlooville, and that particular school is also linked to the inspection that's happened in Basingstoke. So we've had 3 inspections within, well, sort of 6 weeks, because I don't really count September as a month in school year. It's just a settling in month. With across those 3 inspections, we've had 1 where there's been a deep dive into careers, and you will know, if you're one of my schools, that it is completely unheard of for any Ofsted inspections to actually do deep dives into careers. It's only happening now purely because of the detail within the statutory guidance, and it's given the Ofsted inspectors something to hang their inspections against. There are expectations within the statutory guidance, which means it's easier for them to actually go in and do an inspection and looking for what they're expecting to see as a result of the guidance. We also know that there is a lot of preparation going on at the moment. I'm frightened of asking the question when I go into my meetings with my schools at the moment. Out of my 20, I have 9 that are expecting an Ofsted inspection either before Christmas or after Christmas, and I've got another 3 that are expecting it in the rest of the academic year. There's lots of reasons why they're all expecting them, but there's a look of rabbit in headlights when I start the conversation, and it does lead the support that they want from us at the moment. Some would argue, well, if the stuff was in place in the first place, they shouldn't be so worried. My response to that is the stuff is there. It's just that what I need, sometimes they need the support from us to say, this is what you need to do. This is what we know is happening within the inspections. And if you do this, that, and the other, then all you're doing is putting together what's already in existence. So what do we know? As I've just said, there have been local schools and colleges where there have been what we call deep dives. The increase in your involvement in careers is helping the preparation, because you are able to go to governing teams and SLT with what you know is in place and your recommendations for what needs to be in place. We know that there's a lot of reviews of websites going on, and I was told literally yesterday that we must stop using Baker Clause as the technical term, and we need to start using provider access legislation compliance, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it means basically the same thing. What we know nationally is that when an Ofsted inspection is coming in, it will be 3-way. They will speak to teachers, they will speak to stakeholders, and to SLT, and they will also speak to young people. And when they're speaking to the students, they actually want to find out what they're being told is in place by the careers lead and SLT. The students can actually recognise, and how much of their involvement goes into evaluating and therefore improving the programme. So those conversations will be taking place. They're looking to see whether careers leader training is being taken up, and that is something that we didn't talk overly in detail in part 1. It might be something that you want to go back and talk to your careers leader about. I know that some of the schools that are represented here today, your careers leaders have had training, or they're actually going through training. I think that's something that we're going to be looking at increasingly over the next few months, especially as we move towards next September. Is the student journey linked to curriculum and careers education? Are we making assumptions that what is in place is actually meeting need? And if I go back to that conversation that I had with the previous careers leader, when the EA was, we were both challenging, some of the things that we were challenging were, well, we run it this month every single year for the last 10 years, therefore it's going to be in place at that time, and nobody's thought to actually ask the students, is that appropriate to them? Is it the best time? Is it meaningful for them? So we need to stop thinking about assuming what should be in a careers education and employer programme, and actually asking the students if it meets their need and it's meaningful. And we go back to that really important word of impact. What impact is the programme having on the students? And that is what Ofsted will be looking at. Is it therefore ambitious? Are you looking at ensuring compliance against the provider access legislation by having apprenticeships promoted and organisations and employers coming in from a wide range of sectors? And last but not least, the destinations for both SEND and NEET. The Ofsted inspectors are looking to find out how aware you are of what destinations data might be for both of those groups, what things you're putting in place, and again, what assumptions are you making? I've heard a number of SN schools tell me in the last few months, well, there's no point in us telling our young people about apprenticeships because none of them are ever going to get into an apprenticeship. That might be true in theory, but you shouldn't be assuming that the students themselves don't want to hear about it. So what do we recommend? What we would like you to do back is go back and start looking at the careers journey that the students are having in your settings, and do your staff and, more importantly, your students recognise what the journey is? Because one, if Ofsted come in, they're going to want to talk to both about their input into the journey. But secondly, going forward, whether you've got Ofsted coming in or not, your programme should be built around something that everybody around the table who contributes and receives the programme should recognise. So if it's embedded into different subject areas, do the teachers in those subject areas recognise when it's taking place? And again, there's a school around in this meeting today where those sorts of conversations are starting to take place. There are tools that we can give your careers leads to help that process. So all you have to do is, if you identify an issue that you would like to resolve, you might not know how you can go about that, contact one of us and we can certainly give you a heads up onto the best way forward. Or we can, suggest a meeting with the three of you, with you, yourself, us and the careers leader, so we can talk about it, and your EA as well. So I think I've gone through the assumptions or as proof it meets need to death. I'm not going to deal on that one anymore. How are employers engaging with your institution? What messages are on your website? And that is a big one. We know that if Ofsted are coming into your institute, they will look at your website ahead of their sessions with you. And going forward, again, regardless of whether Ofsted are coming or not, how you can start promoting yourself and the website becomes your shop window to employers is increasingly important. We've had a number of amazing website changes in the last in the last month actually, where schools have suddenly recognised that they need to promote themselves to their local employers, and all of a sudden they've got specific pages on a website just informing employers about how they can support. So again, whether Ofsted is coming or not, it's a really good thing to start looking at. And with your community, with your external viewpoint and your critical eye, have a look at the website and put yourself into the mind of different people who might be accessing it. So if you were a new parent, what would the website tell you about what the careers provision is? What would it tell you about how many students are going into apprenticeships as opposed to FE, as opposed to sixth form? Do they keep tabs on all your alumni? Would you know how many students are going to university, and if so, what sorts of universities? Have you got links with local employers on there? Are you sharing the examples of classroom sessions that they've had with you? Think about the website from a number of different sources and put yourself in those places, and go back and feed that back with your careers lead, because your external view is really valuable. And finally, going back again, how can you prove to Ofsted and to anybody else that the provider access legislation is being meaningfully met for all students? What is the impact on the provision that you're giving them, which proves that you're meeting the needs of the provider access legislation? Now, on here, there is a link so when I send these slides out, this will take you to a PDF which the Careers and Enterprise Company have produced, and they're going to continue to produce termly, which has been created using feedback from recent Ofsted inspections. So as we find out if they start changing the nature of what they're asking, those PDFs will be changed accordingly, and we will make sure that as we receive them, which we will do termly, that I will make sure that all the governors get sent that out. Okay, that's the end of the Ofsted bit. Before I move on to the next bit, is there any questions?
Right. Yeah, so what Jan's asked me to do is really just speak about what the direction of travel is for the network that as it exists now. Currently, we have 104 schools and colleges in a network. We look to link a enterprise advisor, a business volunteer to each of those schools. And, you know, pretty much around what was being said, you know, they are scattered across the Hampshire and Surrey area. As a network, we used to, pre-COVID, bring them together in local authorities. During COVID, it kind of actually worked in our favour because we could get wider, and therein lies that sharing information and best practice that actually happened as well. And it was a really good way of getting other schools and colleges connected. Some saw that as positive, some as a negative, but I think definitely around that best practice and sharing information, definitely positive overall. What does a career hub do? So a careers hub has been implemented nationally by the Careers and Enterprise Company, and the networks as they are now, if you think of it as lots of schools everywhere, are being moved to a hub where it brings together a group of schools and colleges who have careers aspirations. They're building it into their school's development plan, and they work together more around that sharing information, best practice, but also around resources as well. And I'll come to the resources a bit further down. But it also means that a group of employers called Cornerstone employees can basically say, right, this is a group of schools who are really engaged with careers, and we have an education program that we can build into that. And the schools within that, we are hoping that they will help us identify what they want. We do that now. We give them polls, what they want. The highest thing at the moment has been apprenticeships, as an example. They're starting to give us lists of activities that they would like employers to be involved in. And so it's building everything within that. And hopefully, things like a website, you know, there are lots of things we'd love to do. I'm not going to promise anything, but it does bring it all together in that hub model. And it helps with that change and movement. So we can go to the schools and say, what do you want? What are you looking at? There is some additional funding for this kind of a hub. So as an example of this, within that hub, and these hubs can be up to 80 schools and colleges, you know, so they can be quite big. However, with that size comes power. So for example, at the moment we see schools that are doing careers fairs dotted all over the place. It's really challenging. I mean, David's already said, you know, it's challenging for his school getting employers to it. It's challenging for employers to attend them. You know, Kathy said, you know, really difficult to get people out of their day to do this sort of thing. However, if we run one event for the whole region, which benefited all of the schools, it would save them a lot of grief, a lot of hassle, a lot of logistics, a lot of time and resource, that we could do something like, whether it be a virtual or a, you know, a physical event. There is a potential for that to happen if the schools want it. There is a potential for other resources to be created if the schools want it, and it's much better if you have that collective to do that. So that's the other side to it as well. There is a link on there which you will be able to access when you get this presentation, so you can look more into the details of it. But it is basically a collective group of schools and colleges with the purpose of improving careers for their young people and having an impact and an outcome. And therefore it allows other stakeholders like the local authorities or the Cornerstone employees to better engage with them and centralise everything. I'm pretty sure you'll, you know, as school governors, as business business volunteers. Schools are being inundated from all directions and totally overwhelmed. So some centralisation will really help the schools and colleges to really progress and develop their careers education programme. Next slide, please. In our direction of travel to do that, we have been looking at the schools and colleges this year, and we have schools that are in the network, and there are schools that we have put into what we call a careers hiatus. There are some schools and colleges who struggle to put careers as a priority within their institute, and that might just be temporary. I mean, if I give you an example, one sense college actually had to close down during COVID, so they're just building everything up again. Some schools just have a lot of other challenges which they're having to deal with. So by doing this, we're kind of giving them that holiday from us constantly saying, can you do this? Can you achieve this? Because we're there to support them, but if we're not supporting them, we don't want to be causing them an issue either. So we have at the moment 80, I think we're at 83 schools and colleges in the network, and therein lies we have the capacity to give them one-to-one support with an enterprise coordinator. We're looking for them to have a business volunteer support, and then we're doing other things. We're looking at specific projects that we can trial and pilot out with these engaged schools that we could potentially roll out elsewhere. So for example, we're looking at a virtual reality project with a school, which potentially we could share, or at least share the outcomes of it with other schools who are struggling with work experience, as an example. And they're the kind of things we can pilot, and then particularly in a hub, start rolling out on a wider basis. But it's obviously allowing us to do it on an impact and evaluation basis, so that we know that we're getting the outcomes that everyone is looking for. And in terms of event priorities, we're looking to talk to them about how can we get you over that slight hurdle there, because a lot of our schools, particularly in Gatsby Benchmark 1, they are missing out on Gatsby Benchmark 1 by a very small percentage. So we can bring those schools together who are struggling with that particular thing and go, right, this is how other schools do it. How can we help you overstep that hurdle? So we can start actually working on some of the challenges and blockages that some of these schools and colleges have. Those in careers hiatus, they are not out of the picture in any way, shape or form. We're just giving them a break. We're still keeping them up to date with what's going on, and they can come back into the network when it's suitable for them to do so. So please don't think we're not excluding anybody. We're not discriminating anyway. We're just supporting those that want it at that particular time. Next slide, please. So the model that we've used to try and identify and categorize the schools and colleges are along this model here. Every school and college has a memorandum of understanding, and this is set by the Careers and Enterprise Company as to the elements that should be met for good careers strategy to be implemented within a school. So we've got a careers leader, absolutely is #1 priority. Governor engagement, fantastic to see you all on here. So thank you very much for your support. Having a business volunteer, that EA, enterprise advisor. SLT engagement, obviously SLT engagement is so key because they build the strategy, they build the school development plan. So having them on board and having their buy-in is really crucial to all of this. Termly compass evaluation, we've talked about the compass. How do we know where we're going to get to if we don't know where we're starting? So it's really key that the school are doing that on a termly basis. Half-termly meetings with my team is really key because obviously we want to make sure that there is momentum and progress constantly happening. The careers leader being trained, that's a training that is funded by the Careers and Enterprise Company, and the school actually gets £1,000 bursary for it as well, so they can use that for careers activities or resources once the careers leader has completed their training. Gatsby Benchmark 1 we feel is really key because if you don't have the plan, you don't have the stable careers foundations, it's really difficult to put everything in place. And that Gatsby Benchmark 1 is about, do you have a plan? Is it on your website? Do you evaluate it? So it's really as business people that I know are on here, strategy is what we do day in, day out. We're at state A, we want to be at state B, and how do we get there? And that's what benchmark 1 is all about. So what we've done is trailblazers are those that we feel are those that are achieving all of those elements right now, and they are the ones that we are really trying to work with throughout this year to start the foundations of the hub. And we've got schools who really want to become trailblazers, and we're really pushing and helping them to get to that point. Leaders in careers, they're not quite there. You know, they are not achieving something within that. The careers leader trained and the gaps benchmark 1 are sort of the key things, but they're probably meeting or potentially meeting the other areas. Developing careers, they've got a careers leader, probably engaged, really keen to do things, but possibly don't have the other elements in place yet. And it sometimes can be that they're brand new in position. So we're just starting from really from the starting post and helping them get to the finish line on that basis. Careers hiatus just haven't unfortunately achieved all of those elements. This is a fluid thing as well. As I say, when we went out to schools and colleges with this, the number of those that we felt would be careers hiatus, they came back and said, absolutely no way, you are not putting us into a holiday. We're going to deal with this. And they've jumped into the leaders in careers generally. And then we've got those in leaders careers who said, right, what do I have to do to be a trailblazer? So it's a fluid element within the capacity that we have. So that will then take us, those in the trailblazer are more than eligible to join the hub, because there is an application process to join the hub. Leaders in careers, they're heading in that direction. And actually what we want within the careers hub is we want those trailblazers, and we want those who have the aspiration to be there. And like was said before, sharing information, best practice will bring hopefully all of our schools and colleges to be really of a high excellence and a high level within the national network. Next slide, please. So some of the practicalities of that is, as I said, in terms of bringing that group together, it is a community of practice. That is an opportunity for schools to share that information and best practice. In the practical side of things, it does mean that we have a change of resource. So we do have enterprise coordinators, but we do actually get a careers hub lead who works on a strategic basis. And we had an operational hub lead who works on the operational basis. So as an example, when I mentioned about a careers fair or something like that, they are possibly looking at that kind of thing. It does mean that we would also receive a project officer, which would enable us to be a little bit more operational than we are now. At the moment, our remit is to be strategic, whereas we can potentially be putting on events, we can be potentially coordinating events, we can be collaborating with others, and we can do that targeted around what the schools and that community of practice are looking for. The additional funding, obviously, we would all love to have that additional funding at the moment, and obviously I would never guarantee this. This is all government based. There is additional funding, and at the moment it is given on a per school basis. So it is the model across the national view is very different. Some will provide that to the individual schools, some will hold it as an overall budget. And so again, this is where the hub model will allow us to provide the best solution for the schools within it through consulting with them and through that community of practice. So that's the kind of practical side of things. In terms of resources, we'll have the enterprise coordinators who are still giving that one-to-one support with the schools and colleges. But as you can see, it will hopefully bring in that community of practice, sharing of sharing of best practice and information, the potential for a centralized website as an example. There is so many opportunities and so many different models that we can work towards, and we're thinking about and looking at piloting things this year. That will come out of that hub model, and it is working elsewhere. So we're in a really, really good position to be able to look at what's going on elsewhere and work out which bits would work for us and how the stakeholders would be engaged with that as well. So that's to me a real positive, that we've got a long run into this to make it work and get the buy-in of the stakeholders. I think that's my last slide, but I'm not sure, Jan. Yes.
So let's continue. So one of the things that we looked at in the last session was the number of people who could have something to do with careers in your organisations. I don't want to do another straw poll, but I'm hoping that since we spoke last, that your understanding of how many people has increased, and that you've actually got some names against some of these tasks within your organisation. So today I want to go on to that in a slightly different way, because for you to be able to really get underneath what's going on in your schools and be able to, you know, support in your role, it's more about looking at the different responsibilities and the different breadth that careers has within your organisations. And I'm going to share an incredibly busy slide with you. So I'm going to put it up. It is very difficult to read because it is so busy. But when you get your slide pack, obviously you can use this, and I'm hoping it's going to, you can use it as a mapping exercise. This, for the purposes of this discussion, it's actually called Careers Leader Responsibilities. What I would like to do, rather than look at it from the careers leader point of view, is look at it in terms of the different themes that careers has across your school, or careers includes and is involved within across your schools and colleges. So you've actually got a journey here, and what I would suggest when you go forward is start looking at these different aspects of the journey. And I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work in a minute, and we'll come back, and rather than do it in a breakout group, what we'll do is we'll actually look at it in terms of a discussion. So there's the accountability bit. Some of that accountability could be because you've got to prove your existence, and prove your and show that how you're measuring your achievement. So in terms of like things like destinations, neat returns, EHCPs, there's the retention of students, there's the attendance. Some of that is really important within a college environment, because, you know, a lot of funding sits with the individual student. There's accountability from Ofsted. Then there's the auditing. How can you actually measure what you're doing is actually making a difference? So you've obviously got things like your Compass Plus in terms of you can measure what students, there's another tool called Unifrog. Some of you might have access to Unifrog. So you can actually look at what the attendance has been in terms of an individual student at the different events and things that they can engage with in. You've got your Gatsby benchmarks, which are obviously a very good tool to start measuring. You've got the CDI framework, which we talked about in part 1. This hasn't been updated with the dates, but you've got the statutory guidance and the career strategy, which are now the same document, and that should have 2021 against it. Then you've got the strategy. What are you saying that you're going to actually, you've done your auditing, what are you going to say that you're going to be delivering against what you know has worked? So you've obviously got to look at, is there any budget? Is there any resources against that? Can you look at what you say on your website is going to be delivered within your strategy? You've then got all the staff and all of the different roles that were on the previous slide. Now, in some schools, the careers leader is managing all of these different things completely in isolation. In other schools, each of these different things could be a different member of staff. It could be a member of senior leadership. In some schools, it's the head teacher. In other schools, it might be a head of department. So you almost need to go back and start mapping against these different themes what they are and who they are. So you've got the careers offer, you know, what bits of the careers education, which bits are information and which bits of advice and guidance. If you remember the case study that we did in part 1, when we broke down what the CE, the I and the AG meant. Then you've got the actual overarching careers programme and how embedded that is Is it all within, you know, is it across all of the different year groups? We've already started to hear that some of you are starting to think about year 7 implementation ready for September. Then we move on to partnership and support, the sorts of engagements that Paul and David have been talking about today, the sorts of things that Tracy and Adam are doing in terms of building up stakeholder work with employers. And then you've got quality assurance. How can you measure and benchmark that what you're actually doing is reaching the correct level? So your role as a governor, your role as a member of SLT and the governing body, how can you make sure that when Ofsted come in, that what you say you're doing is good and professional and actually pushing the process out all the time? And then you've got your students, who actually probably should be the first thing in this link, but no, they're actually the last. And how they can fill into it. Now I'm going to stop. I've got to move this away over here. So what I would like to do is I'm going to come back. I'm going to open the screen back up again. And I'd like you to discuss which of those different things you are aware of, and arising from that, what do you think that you need to go back and start discussing with your senior leadership? So I'm going to come back. So what I thought would be really helpful for all of you would be to know what we as a team at EM3, Enterprise M3, who are part paid by EM3 and part paid by the Careers and Enterprise Company, do to support you. And David's already hinted at some of the things that we're sending out more on a bespoke basis at the moment, which we're going to start sending out much more generically. So the first thing that you get is you get the support of somebody like me called an enterprise coordinator. And we've each got a range of schools and colleges, depending on whether we're full-time or part-time. Megan has 20, I have 20, and then my colleagues have between 10 and 20, depending on whether they're full or part-time. You should know who they are. If you don't, and you want me to put you in touch with them, at the end of this session, when I send everything out, which will be in the next couple of days, you know, by all means, ask me who that is, and then I can put you in contact. There will be further training that we will put on, and I've put EM3 training on there because it's very important that you recognise that there is a difference between what we as an EM3 team and what the CEC nationally will be putting into place for you. So there is there'll be ongoing training like this. We're also going to be starting to put on the governor networking groups that came out of the sessions that we did in July. There was a demand for that. I've held back from running the first one because I wanted to get the second of the training done first, so that we were all able to be at the same level. In the session that I ran 2 weeks ago of part 1, the big request from everybody that attended that was to do something in more depth about the Gatsby benchmarking. And if you feel that that would be great, then we can do that. If there are other things that you would rather that we looked at from the first networking focus, then by all means email me, and you know, we can look at doing whatever you want. So that will be happening from January. We already have been sending out to you the half-termly newsletter, which I can send out the previous copies if people want to see the ones that came out before the ones in September. But in July, if people had signed up to the July governors training, then they were sent the one in July. They will have been sent the one in October, and they will get the one that's coming up when we've written it next week. There will be an ongoing invitation to you to come to our school meetings, in the same way that our EAs have been invited. There is a statutory requirement when a school signs their MOU, their Memorandum of Understanding, that a governor should attend at least one meeting a year. And if you are able to invite your head teacher to come along to one of those meetings as well, that would be incredibly valuable. And I think Tracy explained why we're looking at getting as much SLT buy-in as possible. And then finally, there are the CEC national resources and training modules, which shouldn't be confused with what we're putting in place locally. So I'm going to go on to what those sorts of things can be. In terms of what you can get from us, we can certainly introduce you to your enterprise advisor, so the Pauls and the Davids of this world. Most of the schools on this talk, I think all of you actually, have got an enterprise advisor in place. We are recruiting a few at the moment. If any of you know people who you think would make excellent enterprise advisors, or you're interested in doing that role yourself, please let us know, because we're always interested in getting people into the role, and it is slightly different to what you would be doing as a careers link governor, and it is possible for you to do both. So the other things that we would do, we would be able to provide you resources about the local labour market and the skills need. We send our schools a weekly bulletin, and in that weekly bulletin there will be a whole range of different things depending on what we've received that week. So there could be information about local apprenticeships or work experience done virtually. There could be sector information. There could be huge bits of data about local labour market. The weekly bulletin is what it is, depending on what we have that week. And as you've heard from some schools, they automatically post that out straight. I'm hoping somebody's let them in. So some schools post that weekly bulletin out as it comes to them from us. Some schools cut and paste, and they might send some bits to their school colleagues. They might put some on the parents' page. They will use it as they can use it however they like. And the last thing, obviously, that we would do is link you up to other careers link governors within the area, which is what we've started to do through sessions like this. In terms of the CEC offer, as in the national offer, I'm lucky enough to be on the national governing working group, and we're creating online training modules. So we've already created an induction, which I have to say is very similar to the one that you're having now, but we're in the process of writing some very specific training modules. We're doing one on impact and we're doing one on inclusion. And when they come out, they will come under the CEC heading, but you are in touch that we will send that out to all of you, and you can log on and do that training as you want to, and you can share it if you want to colleagues. And that will be made available to you. There's also an introduction to careers leadership module, which we're going to produce, which goes into a lot more depth about the sorts of things that we've started to discuss today, to be fair. There'll be one about Gatsby benchmarks, although we're going to be doing our own in EM3. And then there's another one which will look at considering the programme and how you can make sure that your strategy meets the needs of your programme. So all of those things are happening nationally, and they will be made available to you in due course. And then the other thing that the CEC nationally does is they create governor digests, and they've got a specific part on the CEC resources directory. And in here, there are the direct links. So again, when you get the slide package, these will take you straight out to the resources suitable for either education leaders or governors. And some of you might find both equally useful. So those are the sorts of things that are in the background. Okay, what's the time? Right, okay, we've got 15 minutes, which is just about perfect. So what I'd like to do is come back to you all, and I would like to sort of think about how we as EM3 CEC team and yourselves can work together to improve careers and employer involvement. What extra things you think that we can do to help you in that role? So, you know, I've told you what we're doing so far, but is there other things that you think that would be really helpful? So for example, you know, coming out and speaking to your SLT teams, your head, whatever. And how have you got any recommendations for us to start breaking down the barrier that we sometimes face with engaging with your head teacher? I know that there are some people on this call who are already having those conversations, and they're already arranging those meetings for us to start going and speaking to head teachers. But bearing in mind what Tracy told you about the Careers Hub, it's going to be increasingly important that the Careers Hub reflects the needs of every single school and reflects the needs of every single SLT across our patch. And obviously the key stakeholder in most of those is the head teacher. We do have a large number of careers leaders who are assistant heads, and that makes it slightly easier, but they don't tend to be full-time. The ones who are full-time tend to be careers leads, and I'm going to point the finger at Justin, like Joe at King's. But he will know, because we had that discussion, that she feels that she's not able to go above the level of her line manager, and that's causing us some issues in her being able to move things forward in King's. So I'd also be really interested to know what 2 things you've taken away from the 2 training sessions, because from me going forwards, I'd like to know what you think is the biggest gain. And if you want to put those into the chat, that would be really helpful so that we know that we're actually meeting your needs. So we've got 4 things on there. How can we all work together to support and improve careers and employer involvement across our schools and colleges? What things do you think that we can do extra to help you with that? How can we engage with head teachers, and what are your recommendations for us to do that? And what 2 things personally do each of you want to take away from these training sessions?